Thomas Henry Huxley PCPRSFLS was an English biologist, known as Darwin's Bulldog, for his advocacy of Charles Darwin's theory of evolution. Huxley's famous debate in 1860 with Samuel Wilberforce was a key moment in the wider acceptance of evolution and in his own career. Huxley had been planning to leave Oxford on the previous day, but, after an encounter with Robert Chambers, the author of Vestiges, he changed his mind and decided to join the debate. Wilberforce was coached by Richard Owen, against whom Huxley also debated about whether humans were closely related to apes. Huxley was slow to accept some of Darwin's ideas, such as gradualism, and was undecided about natural selection. But despite this, he was wholehearted in his public support of Darwin. Instrumental in developing scientific education in Britain, he fought against the more extreme versions of religious tradition, originally coining the term in 1869. Huxley elaborated on agnosticism in 1889 to frame the nature of claims in terms of what is knowable and what is not. Huxley states, agnosticism, in fact, is not a creed, but a method, the essence of which lies in the rigorous application of a single principle, the fundamental axiom of modern science. In matters of the intellect, follow your reason as far as it will take you, without regard to any other consideration. In matters of the intellect, do not pretend that conclusions are certain which are not demonstrated or demonstrable. Use of that term has continued to the present day. Huxley had little formal schooling and was virtually self-taught. He became perhaps the finest comparative anatomist of the latter 19th century. He worked on invertebrates, clarifying relationships between groups previously little understood. Later, he worked on vertebrates, especially on the relationship between apes and humans. After comparing Archaeopteryx with Compsognathus, he concluded that birds evolved from small carnivorous dinosaurs, a theory widely accepted today. The tendency has been for this fine anatomical work to be overshadowed by his energetic and controversial activity in favor of evolution, and by his extensive public work on scientific education, both of which had significant effects on society in Britain and elsewhere. Biography. Early life. Thomas Henry Huxley was born in Ealing, then a village in Middlesex. He was the second youngest of 8 children of George Huxley and Rachel Withers. Like some other British scientists of the 19th century such as Alfred Russel Wallace, Huxley was brought up in a literate middle-class family which had fallen on hard times. His father was a mathematics teacher at Ealing School until it closed, putting the family into financial difficulties. As a result, Thomas left school at age 10, after only 2 years of formal schooling. Despite this unenviable start, Huxley was determined to educate himself. He became one of the great autodidacts of the 19th century. At first he read Thomas Carlyle, James Hutton's Geology, and Hamilton's Logic. In his teens he taught himself German, eventually becoming fluent and used by Charles Darwin as a translator of scientific material in German. He learned Latin, and enough Greek to read Aristotle in the original. Later on, as a young adult, he made himself an expert, first on invertebrates, and later on vertebrates, all self-taught. He was skilled in drawing and did many of the illustrations for his publications on marine invertebrates. In his later debates and writing on science and religion, his grasp of theology was better than most of his clerical opponents. Huxley, a boy who left school at 10, became one of the most knowledgeable men in Britain. He was apprenticed for short periods to several medical practitioners. At 13 to his brother-in-law John Cook in Coventry, who passed him on to Thomas Chandler. Notable for his experiments snakes using mesmerism for medical purposes. Chandler's practice was in London's rather Hythe amidst the squalor endured by the Dickensian poor. Here Thomas would have seen poverty, crime and rampant disease at its worst. Next, another brother-in-law took him on. John Salt, his elder sister's husband, now 16, Huxley entered Sydenham College, a cut-price anatomy school whose founder, Marshall Hall, discovered the reflex arc. All this time Huxley continued his program of reading, which more than made up for his lack of formal schooling. A year later, buoyed by excellent results and a silver medal prize in the apothecary's yearly competition, Huxley was admitted to study at Charing Cross Hospital, where he obtained a small scholarship. At Charing Cross, he was taught by Thomas Wharton-Jones, professor of ophthalmic medicine and surgery at University College London. Jones had been Robert Knox's assistant when Knox bought cadavers from Birkenhead. The young Wharton-Jones, who acted as go-between, was exonerated of crime, but thought it best to leave Scotland. He was a fine teacher, up-to-date in physiology, and also an ophthalmic surgeon. In 1845, under Wharton-Jones' guidance, Huxley published his first scientific paper demonstrating the existence of a hitherto unrecognized layer in the inner sheath of hairs, a layer that has been known since as Huxley's layer. No doubt remembering this, and of course knowing his merit, later in life Huxley organized a pension for his old tutor. At 20 he passed his first MB examination at the University of London, winning the gold medal for anatomy and physiology. However, he did not present himself from the final exams and consequently did not qualify with a university degree. His apprenticeships and exam results formed a sufficient basis for his application to the Royal Navy. Voyage of the Rattlesnake. Age 20, Huxley was too young to apply to the Royal College of Surgeons for a license to practice, yet he was deep in debt. So, at a friend's suggestion, he applied for an appointment in the Royal Navy. He had references on character and certificates showing the time spent on his apprenticeship and on requirements such as dissection and pharmacy. Sir William Burnett, the Physician General of the Navy, interviewed him and arranged for the College of Surgeons to test his competence. Finally, Huxley was made assistant surgeon to HMS Rattlesnake, about to start for a voyage of discovery and surveying to New Guinea and Australia. The Rattlesnake left England on the 3rd of December 1846, and, once they had arrived in the southern hemisphere, Huxley devoted his time to the study of marine invertebrates. He began to send details of his discoveries back to England, where publication was arranged by Edward Forbes FRS. Both before and after the voyage, Forbes was something of a mentor to Huxley. Huxley's paper on the anatomy and the affinities of the family of Medusae was published in 1849 by the Royal Society in its Philosophical Transactions. Huxley united the hydroid and sertularian polyps with the Medusae to form a class to which he subsequently gave the name of Hydrozoa. The connection he made was that all the members of the class consisted of two cell layers, enclosing a central cavity, a stomach. This is characteristic of the phylum now called the Cnidaria. He compared this feature to the serous and mucous structures of embryos of higher animals. When at last he got a grant from the Royal Society for the printing of plates, Huxley was able to summarize this work in the Oceanic Hydrozoa, published by the Ray Society in 1859. The value of Huxley's work was recognized, and, on returning to England in 1850, he was elected a Fellow of the Royal Society. In the following year, at the age of 26, he not only received the Royal Society Medal but was also elected to the Council. He met Joseph Dalton Hooker and John Tyndall, who remained his lifelong friends. The Admiralty retained him as a nominal assistant surgeon, so he might work on the specimens he collected and the observations he made during the voyage of the Rattlesnake. He solved the the problem of appendicularity, whose place in the animal kingdom Johannes Peter Müller had found himself wholly unable to assign. It and the Ascidians have both, as Huxley showed, tunicates, today regarded as a sister group to the vertebrates in the phylum Chordata. Other papers on the morphology of the cephalopods and on brachiopods and rotifers are also noteworthy. The rattlesnake's official naturalist John McGillivray did some work on botany, and proved surprisingly good at notating Australian Aboriginal languages. He wrote up the voyage in the standard Victorian 2-volume format. Later life. Huxley effectively resigned from the Navy and, in July 1854, he became Professor of Natural History at the Royal School of Mines and Naturalist to the British Geological Survey in the following year. In addition, he was Fullerian Professor at the Royal Institution 1855–58 and 1865–67, Hunterian Professor at the Royal College of Surgeons 1863–69, President of the British Association for the Advancement of Science 1869–1870, President of the Royal Society 1883–85, Inspector of Fisheries 1881–85, and President of the Marine Biological Association 1884–1890. The 31 years during which Huxley occupied the chair of natural history at the Royal School of Mines included work on vertebrate paleontology and on many projects to advance the place of science in British life. Huxley retired in 1885, after a bout of depressive illness which started in 1884. He resigned the presidency of the Royal Society in mid-term, the inspectorship of fisheries, and his chair, and took 6 months' leave. His pension was a fairly handsome £1,500 a year. In 1890, he moved from London to Eastbourne, where he edited the 9 volumes of his collected essays. In 1894 he heard of Eugene Dubois' discovery in Java of the remains of Pithecanthropus erectus. Finally, in 1895, he died of a heart attack, and was buried in North London at St Marylebone. This small family plot had been purchased upon the death of his beloved youngest son Noel, who died of scarlet fever in 1860. Huxley's wife Henrietta and Anne Acute Heathorne and son Noel are also buried there. No invitations were sent out, but 200 people turned up for the ceremony. They included Hooker, Flower, Foster, Lancaster, Joseph Lister and, apparently, Henry James. Huxley and his wife had 5 daughters and 3 sons. Noel Huxley died aged 4. Jessie Oriana Huxley married architect Fred Waller in 1877. Marion Huxley married artist John Collier in 1879. Leonard Huxley married Julie Arnold. Rachel Huxley married civil engineer Alfred Eckersley in 1884. Henrietta Huxley married Harold Roller, travelled Europe as a singer. Henry Huxley became a fashionable general practitioner in London. Ethel Huxley married artist John Collier in 1889. Public duties and awards. From 1870 onwards, Huxley was to some extent drawn away from scientific research by the claims of public duty. He served on 8 royal commissions, from 1862 to 1884. From 1871 to 1880 he was a secretary of the Royal Society, and from 1883 to 1885 he was president. He was president of the Geological Society from 1868 to 1870. In 1870, he was president of the British Association at Liverpool and, in the same year, was elected a member of the newly constituted London School Board. He was president of the Quackett Microscopical Club from 1877 to 1879. He was the leading person amongst those who reformed the Royal Society, persuaded government about science, and established scientific education in British schools and universities. Before him, science was mostly a gentleman's occupation. After him, science was a profession. He was awarded the highest honours then open to British men of science. The Royal Society, who had elected him as Fellow when he was 25, awarded him the Royal Medal the next year, a year before Charles Darwin got the same award. He was the youngest biologist to receive such recognition. Then later in life came the Copley Medal in 1888 and the Darwin Medal in 1894. The Geological Society awarded him the Wollaston Medal in 1876. The Linnean Society awarded him the Linnean Medal in 1890. There were many other elections and appointments to eminent scientific bodies. These and his many academic awards are listed in the Life and Letters. He turned down many other appointments, notably the Linacre Chair in Zoology at Oxford and the Mastership of University College, Oxford. In 1873 the King of Sweden made Huxley, Hooker and Tyndall Knights of the Order of the Polar Star. They could wear the insignia but not use the title in Britain. Huxley collected many honorary memberships of foreign societies, academic awards and honorary doctorates from Britain and Germany. He also became foreign member of the Royal Netherlands Academy of Arts and Sciences in 1892. As recognition of his many public services, he was given a pension by the state, and was appointed Privy Councillor in 1892. Despite his many achievements, he was given no award by the British state until late in life. In this he did better than Darwin, who got no award of any kind from the state. Perhaps Huxley had commented too often on his dislike of honours, or perhaps his many assaults on the traditional beliefs of organized religion made enemies in the establishment. He had vigorous debates in print with Benjamin Disraeli, William Ewart Gladstone and Arthur Balfour, and his relationship with Lord Salisbury was less than tranquil. Huxley was for about 30 years evolution's most effective advocate, and for some Huxley was the premier advocate of science in the 19th century. The whole English-speaking world, though he had many admirers and disciples, his retirement and later death left British zoology somewhat bereft of leadership. He had, directly or indirectly, guided the careers and appointments of the next generation, but none were of his stature. The loss of Francis Balfour in 1882, climbing the Alps just after he was appointed to a chair at Cambridge, was a tragedy. Huxley thought he was the only man who can carry out my work. The deaths of Balfour and W.K. Clifford were the greatest losses to science in our time. Vertebrate Paleontology. The first half of Huxley's career as a paleontologist is marked by a rather strange predilection for persistent types, in which he seemed to argue that evolutionary advancement was rare or absent in the Phanerozoic. In the same vein, he tended to push the origin of major groups such as birds and mammals back into the Paleozoic era, and to claim that no order of plants had ever gone extinct. Much paper has been consumed by historians of science ruminating on this strange and somewhat unclear idea. Huxley was wrong to pitch the loss of orders in the Phanerozoic as low as 7%, and he did not estimate the number of new orders which evolved. Persistent types sat rather uncomfortably next to Darwin's more fluid ideas. Despite his intelligence, it took Huxley a surprisingly long time to appreciate some of the implications of evolution. However, gradually Huxley moved away from this conservative style of thinking as his understanding of paleontology, and the discipline itself, developed. Huxley's detailed anatomical work was, as always, first-rate and productive. His work on fossil fish shows his distinctive approach, whereas pre-Darwinian naturalists collected, identified and classified, Huxley worked mainly to reveal the evolutionary relationships between groups. The lobed-finned fish have paired appendages whose internal skeleton is attached to the shoulder or pelvis by a single bone, the humerus or femur. His interest in these fish brought him close to the origin of tetrapods, one of the most important areas of vertebrate paleontology. The study of fossil reptiles led to his demonstrating the fundamental affinity of birds and reptiles, which he united under the title of Sauropsida. His papers on Archaeopteryx and the origin of birds were of great interest then and still are. Apart from his interest in persuading the world that man was a primate and had descended from the same stock as the apes, Huxley did little work on mammals, with one exception. On his tour of America, Huxley was shown the remarkable series of fossil horses discovered by O.C. Marsh in Yale's Peabody Museum. Marsh was part paleontologist, part robber baron, a man who had hunted buffalo and met Red Cloud. Funded by his uncle George Peabody, Marsh had made some remarkable discoveries. The huge Cretaceous aquatic bird Hesperornis and the dinosaur footprints along the Connecticut River were worth a trip by themselves. But the horse fossils were really special. The collection at the time went from the small four-toed forest-dwelling Orohippus from the Eocene through three-toed species such as Meohippus to species more like the modern horse. By looking at the teeth, he could see that, as the size grew larger and the toes reduced, the teeth changed from those of a browser to those of a grazer. All such changes could be explained by a general alteration in habitat from forest to grassland. And, as we now know, that is what did happen over large areas of North America from the Eocene to the Pleistocene. The ultimate causative agent was global temperature reduction. The modern account of the evolution of the horse has many other members, and the overall appearance of the tree of descent is more like a bush than a straight line. The horse series also strongly suggested that the process was gradual, and that the origin of the modern horse lay in North America, not in Eurasia. If so, then something must have happened to horses in North America, since none were there when Europeans arrived. The experience was enough for Huxley to give credence to Darwin's gradualism, and to introduce the story of the horse into his lecture series.